Welcome, everyone. My name is Chad Wers. I'm the executive sponsor for the Commonwealth IT sourcing effort that we're going through. And on behalf of Nelson Moe, the state CIO, I welcome you to this event. We've talked a lot in the past through reports and at ITAC meetings and other venues. We've been given high-level ideas and tidbits of what we're planning to do with our IT sourcing effort. This is our first real dive into our intentions. I really appreciate the market responding as vigorously as it did. We're doing something very different than what we've done in the past, something different than what a lot of states have done in the past, and having the marketplace's assistance in finding the right solution for not only the Commonwealth and its citizens, but also the vendor community is very important. So we've got a lot of content today. We won't get to everything today, but it'll be a good high-level overview of the solution and of what we believe the solution will be to help our supplier community decide, is this the right business to pursue. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Perry Pasquale, who is actually doing all the work on this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Make sure you all can hear me. As Chad mentioned, I am the Director for IT Sourcing. Let's see if we can cut down the feedback. It's a little bit loud inside the conference room. My last glance at the control panel, we have about 30 folks dialed in properly through the webinar. And then we probably have a whole bunch of other folks joining by dialing in direct. Legit. What we'd like to do is, if you're familiar with using the GoToMeeting capacity, if you have some questions, we are actually going to mute everyone that's participating by phone. If you have questions, you're welcome to send a note to our individual here facilitating to see if you have a question by chat, and then we will open up all mics at the end for those folks to pose any questions we might have then. We've got about 150 slides to page through, so beg your indulgence. Honestly, we want to just give you a high-level overview of what it means for you all to come to this particular event as we get ready for what we're calling the Wave 2 sourcing activities. I am joined by Patrick Moore from Integra Supply. They have been, for the better part of a year and a half, our third-party advisor. We recognize as a Commonwealth that it's been quite some time since we've endeavored to source such a significant scope of work. We have been working with our current partner, Northrop Grumman, through the scope of infrastructure services under the Comprehensive Infrastructure Agreement. And so that's one of our reference points for what we're undertaking here as much as recently as the beginning of the year. So we'll begin with a program overview. We spent the better part of 2015, calendar year 2015, undertaking a bit of, like most consulting engagements, an assessment and a development of recommendations. And all these words simply capture the Commonwealth's intention, VITA's intention on behalf of the Commonwealth, to begin a different chapter relative to our current infrastructure services. And that is to pursue a multi-supplier model which also contains a services integrator. Some of you who have worked with other states are probably familiar with the concept, particularly in Georgia and Texas, so it's not brand new, but we intend here in the Commonwealth to try to take it to a different level. So we appreciate you coming to try to understand and listen to our explanation on what the intention is here. I will let you know, or I'll repeat again, that the report is a public document. It's available on our website. There is an IT sourcing icon which you page through, and the final recommendation delivered by Integris to the Commonwealth is available there for your review. So for the sake of what? The Commonwealth has been at the infrastructure services outsourcing arrangement now for the better part of 10 years, coming up on 11 years actually. And the contract itself expires in 2019 with no other additional renewals available to us. Notwithstanding that, it behooves the Commonwealth to pursue through competitive procurement new, updated potential solutions and price points and commercial terms relative to the technologies that move faster than the terms of our contracts. So that is part of the impetus for driving to this change now. Moreover, we spent the first version of our IT outsourcing focusing on the items on the right, enterprise objectives. You can read them: maintaining cost competitiveness, gaining control and insight, some flexibility to evolve, achieving some level of standardization, upgrading and enhancing our security posture, and developing some procurement and transition skills in that regard. We want to sustain the things we've achieved, but then fold back in a better balance of our agency, our end user community, all those things listed on the left-hand side. So the development of our future infrastructure services or integrated services platform will try to achieve both sets of objectives, not one or the other, because they can coexist. We've seen it elsewhere, and we believe the design and the development in concert with you all, our potential service providers, we can achieve both sets. Our customers, our end users are very passionate about it. We've heard feedback, and we recognize some of our current constraints, and so we're going to try to address those going forward. So what do I mean by the integrated services platform? And for those of you who enjoy jargon and the language that develops as a program takes state, we refer to the thing on the right as a chiclet tray, because by golly, it looks like a bunch of chiclets on a tray. It is Integra Supply's model for a system, an ecosystem, if you will, that includes our end users or our agencies, some 63 executive branch agencies, including VITA. It includes this entity called a Platform Relationship Organization, Service Management, housed within VITA, working in concert with our customer agencies and end users so that we can obtain from the dark blue and the towers beneath it all the services that we need relative to IT infrastructure. If you're familiar with the CIA, it spans everything from end user compute to network and data to server and storage, as well as cross-functional services, messaging and mainframes. Currently, we consume both IBM-based mainframe as well as Unisys. So that expansive breadth of services is all going to market. 2 of them already have. You may or may not be aware that messaging and IBM mainframe are both under active procurements currently. So today's focus then is on the balance of that, wave 2 and wave 3, if you will. So together, it's our intention to begin to build this integrated services platform, and through our competitive procurements, begin to put in place a couple of essential pieces in this wave 2 piece, and that is the multi-sourcing service integrator. How do you bring together a multitude of suppliers and orchestrate them so that our services perform well together and we get what we need from a visibility and transparency, billing, cost control, service request, service turn down, incident and problem management. It is a production environment. All the things that cross-functional services attend to beyond the widget on the desktop or the piece of iron and storage and disk sitting on the floor. So that is the essential part that our customers feel and we need from our IT services. I've represented a couple of things, other intentions we want from our service delivery model. We need to increase transparency within the delivery activities. All your customers currently, as well as the Commonwealth, we want to understand how our services are brought to bear. We are technologists at heart as well, and so it's important to us to understand how our data, how our applications, how our transactions migrate from wherever they are in a secure and efficient fashion. We need the platform to be flexible, to allow the addition of new suppliers, new thoughts, new innovations, new technologies, and when appropriate, the logical retirement of old suppliers and old solutions, if that's appropriate. We need VITA and the enterprise, the administration and the legislature together to have a lot more management control. It gets much more complex moving away from a prime to a prime monolithic model to a multi-supplier model. But at the end of the day, we want the platform to be dynamic, to innovate from within where possible, to accommodate innovation from outside if necessary, to create the transparency, to speak a common language based around ITIL, and to create accountability among that network of suppliers. As you might guess, if you make the current circumstance too large, it would be very difficult for VITA or the customers to understand where things are in the delivery of their services. And it helps us to understand how that's accomplished. There is this feature that you all are probably quite familiar with regards to operating level agreements. And so we want to memorialize, to obligate the players in the services platform to work with one another. We don't want to enable a system where you're siloed and there are gaps and drops. We need to capture and demonstrate that the handoffs, the cooperation exists. And we think all of these elements will then provide for integrated services. We want to continue to enjoy integrated services, not point solutions. If you haven't worked with VITA before, and even if you have, I think it's worthwhile reminding you that beyond the mandated infrastructure service provider for our executive branch agencies, we have other charges as well. They primarily fall into these four categories. We do have governance for Commonwealth information security. Part of Wave 2 deals with the managed security services aspect of this large breadth of infrastructure services. I already mentioned the operation of the IT infrastructure. Excluding our agency's applications. They own, at the end of the day, their data and their applications. But our infrastructure services support the performance of those applications. So they, too, have to participate in that integrated services platform. Governance of IT investments and projects. Many of you are familiar, if you've supported agency projects or VITA's projects, that there is formality around the selection, the exploration of investments, including this program, as well as the execution of projects. We want to continue to enjoy smart, well thought out investments coordinated across the enterprise, as well as crisp delivery of business value among our IT projects. And then through VITA supply chain management, largely the procurement of technology for VITA, both services and goods. Just a little bit of a snapshot, some bragging points for how large the Commonwealth's footprint is relative to infrastructure services. 60,000 PCs, 55,000 phones, 6,100 handheld PDAs, 1.5 petabytes. This is a large scope of activity. And as we said before, we need the future platform to continue to deliver in an integrated fashion and to be able to accommodate innovation and change and to not be static because it's simply a contract. We currently have 2 data centers. One is you're sitting in, and one is the Southwest. One of the things that we hadn't done for quite some time is to engage you all in a conversation, a dialogue. It's very easy to refer to the classic procurement of, I post an RFP, I send it out, you generate responses, you come back and we evaluate, we tell you what the rules of evaluation are, and it's a back and forth. We want that to be more of an engagement with you. We actually want to not tell you the solutions. We want to tell you what we need, actually tell you what we currently have, so that way you can tell us how best to do it in the next few years. So it's our intent to acquire replacement services. We have invited our incumbent to participate. They too may choose to participate. They will certainly be participating, and that's Northrop Grumman. They're here in the room. They will certainly be participating in the provision of information about the current environment. They will help inform the proposals you may choose to submit against some of these RFPs. I've mentioned that we've endeavored on a 3-wave process. Messaging and mainframe, IBM mainframes in particular, are underway. Wave 2, which is the particular focus now, has begun. VITA and its agencies, together with Integris, have already begun the necessary level setting and documentation preparation for RFPs, which will be released in August. And then Wave 3 is the balance of the current services under the CIA, end-user computing, data and voice network. You'll notice there that we don't call out the facility, data centers, as a separate item. We believe the disposition of a facility will be inside the services themselves. So some expectations of the last bullet here. We're seeking suppliers with solutions that meet our requirements. I said at the beginning, at the top of the slide, exactly what we're pursuing. We do not want to dictate. As much as we are technologists and some of us want to tell you how to do it, we actually want you to, in some cases, disregard some of that and say, here's how better to do it, because you guys do it every day. We will offer opportunities for the most qualified suppliers to clarify responses. So part of the procurement process we'll describe somewhat later. At a very high level, we recognize that all you can do is begin with what's posted, and you're going to read and read into what you see, and then develop your proposals. So it's a little bit of a phone game, if you will. But there will be an opportunity for clarifications for those most qualified proposers. This is simply a timeline pictorial. We've got calendar year 16 with a star of "We are here," acknowledging that Wave 1 activities are in process. Wave 2, again, being MSI, server storage, and managed security. And then Wave through end user and the network-related items. You can see the largest and probably the longest duration activities are Wave 2 related. We think it's critical to get the MSI correctly, and to also fold in the first significant tower, heavy computing with server and storage in there as well. And then obviously managed security. We want to sustain the security posture we've achieved to date, and we recognize that should be done in a measured step. The scope of the procurements, simply put, the MSI on the, we've optically said MSI on the left tower, or tower service providers on the right. We're looking at the certain responsibilities that are classically within the MSI to be those oversight and coordination functions and service delivery as it pertains to cross-functional or ITIL-based services. They will have to work hand in hand then with the tower service providers, whether that's server and storage, mainframe, messaging, print and mail, network, end user compute, and some classic back office, finance, invoicing and chargeback, configuration, human resources, potentially some procurement activities, other related business functions. All of these support both integration, visibility, control, as well as execution, coordinated execution among all the entities within the integrated services platform. So relative to the MSI itself in particular, the MSI will encompass not only the cross-functional services, but the service desk. Currently, our service desk is primarily delivered out of Southwest. It has, from Northrop Grumman, its set of tools and policies and procedures and certain staffing levels. All that information will be made available as part of the RFP itself. I keep reinforcing ITIL as the common jargon or language that should be recognized among our service providers and should be the item leveraged as we develop operating level agreements, service management manuals, service level methodologies. That's the expectation relative to ITIL and cross-functional services. I mentioned before that the CIA, or the Comprehensive Infrastructure Services Agreement with Northrop Grumman and the Commonwealth, is the reference point. And in this particular case for the MSI, you can see the particular appendices and schedules that pertain to cross-functional services as well as the help desk or service desk. Server and storage, the second simultaneous procurement, we are looking for essentially hybrid. We are largely on-premise. And we will be looking for on-premise server and storage services. And I have described the central facility, this data center. We have a secondary or a disaster recovery facility out in Southwest. And approximately 50% of our production servers are in this facility and the balance out in remote locations. Those services are currently documented within Appendix 7 to the CIA Mainframe and Server Services Statement of Work. So a reference point there. Security. So security permeates all our services, but what we want is a managed security service. And so that is the structure of the RFP that will go out in August as well. It is going to be requested as a separate tower, but it will behave similar to the MSI in that it is cross-functional in nature. If you can imagine, we will be looking for the MSI to coordinate the endpoints, if you will, within each of the towers, and to bring all of that together in a synthesized fashion so that we can understand our posture, our risks, any of the incidents that may be occurring, and how we're doing relative to changes and sustaining security going forward. Those services are described in Appendix 3 of the CIA. Some other things to consider. Admittedly, VITA and the Commonwealth have been trying to figure out how to navigate to the cloud. We enjoy the same problems and concerns that every other consumer of the cloud has, and we are trying to make sure that we navigate that carefully so that we don't get to a point where our data and our functions are out in the cloud and we don't know how to get them back. Our CIO, Nelson Moe, often refers to it as the data escrow problem. So while we will entertain cloud solutions, I want you all to recognize that is our sensitivity. We want to enjoy economies and the price points that cloud gives us, but we do want to make sure that we attend to the security and the data escrow problems or potential problems that come with that. They may be optional services. There may be optional services that you could bid on that include cloud brokerage and infrastructure as a service. The services will not include IBM mainframe, as that's already under competitive procurement, provided we make an award. And we are currently on a path to retire the Unisys mainframe. We don't anticipate going to market for Unisys. And in all cases, we need disaster recovery. Probably more broadly, we want to understand how you can help us architect more resilient services. So spanning everything from higher availability and continuous services all the way to the break glass in case of emergency. A little bit of the capabilities of suppliers. So these are guidelines. You will see in the RFPs themselves more explicit, more express qualifications. But we wanted to give you a little bit of expectation on our part so that you can make deliberate decisions. We recognize that many of you have to go back to corporate and make decisions about the investments you will make in these competitive procurements. And so we want to inform you of what our expectations are as much as we can today. You just saw about a dozen slides ago the size and scope, the number of agencies, I mentioned 63, the type of business the state engages in, everything from retail to one quip I've heard, we educate, incarcerate, and medicate. So all ranges of business activities that have to be supported by IT infrastructure. We are looking for those of you who have participated in multi-supplier environments. We want delivery-based capabilities. To be frank, we're going to be asking for references and using examples, asking you for examples where you've actually done it. Not that you can, that's fine, but that you have. So that's a fairly high expectation on our part. So take that under consideration. We're also looking for robust transition methodologies. We are where we are today, sort of describe some of the environmentals that exist. But if you're going to propose optional cloud solutions, we need to understand how you're going to help us get there, other than it's going to be on the catalog. We also want you to be customer-centric. I would love that you pay attention to VITA and the CIO, but I promise you the people who are paying the bills and enjoying your services or not enjoying your services are our end users and our end using agencies. So we need you to attend to them as much as you attend to the central IT authority. Upcoming procurement events. I've already mentioned that the Wave 2 activities, MSI, server storage, and managed security, are scheduled to go out through EVA in August. 2-3 months away. We plan to award contracts beginning in June of 2017, so this time next year. Those 3 procurement activities will run in parallel. That is by design because we want them to solution and integrate to one another. We are mandating that the MSI and server storage suppliers not be the same. If our intent was to disaggregate the monolithic model, we don't want to then re-enable and have the same service provider doing both this horizontal execution and control function at the same time they're also delivering, at least not at this point in time. However, the MSI and or the server and storage bidders may bid on security. A little bit of insight into the evaluation process, and as always, more information, more detailed information will be provided in the RFP documents when they're published in August. But these words won't change in these 2 sub-bullets here. We will make decisions as the process unfolds, electing to continue the evaluation of the most qualified proposals, and may request that those suppliers of those proposals participate in meetings for demonstration or clarification. So remember when I said about 15 minutes ago, we actually want to engage you in a dialogue. That is what that means. Rather than just reading your proposals on paper, we actually want to talk to you about it. It will be structured, it will be scripted, it will be even and fair. You know, certain suppliers won't be entitled to more time than others, but it is our intent to make it as even and fair and as express as possible so that we can understand your proposals and you can seek clarification of our requirements. Do your proposals actually match up? Furthermore, we want to call out expressly that we're going to select for negotiation those proposals deemed to be fully qualified and best suited based on the factors stated in the RFP. I'll be obvious, but I wanted to put it forward now at this point in time that the negotiations will proceed with those that are best qualified. With that, I want to take a minute to introduce Patrick, to introduce all of us to a relatively new creature here in the Commonwealth, and that is the notion of these integration sessions. We do have an expectation that for these 3 active procurements, there will be a moment where you all, if you make it to that point, could be invited at your selection to participate in what we're calling integration sessions. So with that.
Yeah, I'll take that. But I'm going to start, David, if you don't mind. Let's head back to the chiclet tray. Slide 5. I know you're playing with the volume controls there. With the old-fashioned way. Anybody know any jokes? Yeah, exactly. All right, so I wanted to take us back to this for a moment because it highlights, it's certainly an eye chart, got it, but it highlights the number of integration points that are going to take place in a new model. Why is that important? It's important because during this procurement process, we want to be able to forecast and prepare for this type of model as much as we possibly can. We want a tower provider to be able to understand how to integrate with an MSI. We want an MSI to understand how they're going to manage multiple towers. We want an MSI to understand how they're going to integrate with a governance model. They want towers to be able to do the same thing. There are going to be a lot of moving pieces, a lot of touch points. There are a lot of moving pieces and touch points inside any type of large-scale delivery model. We want the complexity of this to be understood as we go through the procurement process. And that's difficult to do if providers can't speak during the process. So now what I'd like to do is fast forward to where we were. So I'd go back to slide 23. All right. So the idea of an integration session is, as Perry noted, something bit of a new animal here, certainly. We've seen it used successfully in other public sector environments, but we certainly encounter the challenge of any public sector environment, any public sector procurement, where there's a lot of fear of how to interact, how to have dialogue, and what ends up happening is everybody ends up passing documents back and forth. You miss the richness of conversation, you miss the ability to have a dialogue, you certainly miss the ability to have some type of interaction with who you might be working with in a future state. The integration sessions are designed to be strategic interactions across the 3 parallel procurements that will be going on during this wave. There's also potential interaction with previous waves and future waves as those roll out. Okay? But in the case of this specific wave, and in the case of those who are deemed most qualified by the Commonwealth, we hope to see a process where the various waves can speak. So an MSI provider would be speaking with a server storage provider. An MSI provider would be speaking with a security provider. And the idea behind these sessions is to help reduce areas of overlap. These are going to be scripted sessions. They are going to be done in a manner that will allow y'all to understand the solutions better and for you to help then clarify a response even further. Running down some of the key points here, we are going to call them voluntary. There is no way that anybody can be forced to share any information about a particular solution. Questions that would be asked would be sensitive to any proprietary information. But in our experience, there has been a desire to have these types of dialogues. There's been a willingness to engage. And we certainly understand that there might be concerns around information being shared, and that's something that we try to work with and work around. But we want to make it clear that it's voluntary. However, we've seen value in these types of sessions in the past. I mentioned a minute ago they'd be scripted, and that's what I mean by managed. These are not sit around the room and talk about what's going on and, how's Trump doing today and, how's the weather and that type of thing. There's a process, and as Perry noted, equal time, similar type of dialogue. So everybody's working off of the same page, and again, all designed to try to reduce areas of overlap, increase understanding of the solution so that you can then clarify, take out your own risk, as well as offer a better solution set for the Commonwealth. Facilitated by a client, designed to clarify roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities for all parties. And that would include VITA. I think if you go back to the chiclet tray, we won't do that. But if you go back to the chiclet tray, you have the agencies up at the top. Now, certainly the agencies are end users, they're customer, but there's a part that they're going to play a role in delivery as well. They have a role as the receiver of a service. They also have a role as somebody who might own a piece of a process. And so understanding how to interface with them is going to be important as you build a solution. So why hold these? Already talked about a number of reasons why, but one of the phrases we like to use, we like to connect the dots. There's there's a solution that will be proposed, and that solution is going to be captured inside a set of contractual documents, all of which are intertwined. And we're going to show you a really nasty graphic in a minute just to give you a sense of what that is. But some of them are, your statements of work, your service management manual, your master services agreements, the SLAs, your pricing exhibits. All of these documents have a piece of the solution inside them. And understanding how those various documents work in relation to the solution that you're providing is an important part of those integration sessions. So understanding how those dots connect, how providers will be working with a common set of documents across the environment, but plugging in specifics of a particular solution inside that common set is an important part of these sessions. I've already mentioned removing overlapping scope, providing a forum for delivery teams to describe proposed solutions. We think it's really important to get past, as important as the sales process is, it gets you to a certain point. And we believe that seeing the delivery side during the RFP process is as important as anything is. So we have deep respect for all that goes into developing the proposal and all the capabilities that have to be described and displayed in any type of solution proposal. But we also want to make sure during the process that there's a clear view of how it's going to be delivered. And so the forums begin to get into an understanding of a solution and how that solution is going to be implemented. Supplier education on client environment and potential partners. Certainly, again, there's imperfect information in any type of RFP, whether it's public or private. This is just yet another way to provide some interaction that will help inform a solution and provide more information and clarity. And then, of course, deeper understanding for the client, for VITA, on potential risks and a provider-team dynamic, how particular providers might be able to work together in some type of integrated platform. Today we'll move to the next slide, please. So this is intended to describe some of the challenges that we often see in procurements, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. Anybody in here can come up with another 3, 5, 10, 15 that you might be able to add to any list of this nature. But in particular with regards to integration sessions, these are some of the challenges that we are trying to help with these types of engagements. I'm not going to go down this list. If there's something in here that you want to ask a question about later on, we can obviously go back to the slide. But I think that what we want to convey is that this isn't something that we believe is fun to do to add more time to a schedule or ask teams to come out for yet another client visit or something else like that. There are real challenges that these are designed to help solve. And they are also designed to help reduce the risk of transition and ultimately help reduce the time of implementation. So we believe that taking more time during this process will help improve the opportunity for success when you get past contract signing. There's less figuring out at that point. Not that there will be no figuring out at that point. So we'll move on. I mean, unless there's any questions about this right now, but I think we're going to wait for Q&A until the end anyway. So we'll keep going here. So some of the interactions, and again, this is just to try to give a little more color to what is envisioned in these integration sessions. The Commonwealth will be establishing an agenda and topics, providing equal participation opportunities for proposals deemed best suited. I think that that's important to note. It's not everybody who submits a proposal would be invited to these types of sessions. This is getting into the process where best qualified has been noted, and there's an opportunity to proceed with certain providers, and how those providers would operate in an environment. It'd be important to hold this type of a session. Introduce topics and ask suppliers to discuss their approaches. It would be a role for the Commonwealth. And then facilitating the discussion, referencing RFP requirements and use case examples. And that's an important point because, as in any procurement, there's never perfect information. So there's still going to have to be some rules around how questions are answered. Might be frustrating even when you're inside a session, but it's still intended to give a little more transparency around what's being asked. And so over here, this is designed to help you understand what you're certainly not going to be asked to do. And again, these are all voluntary, but there's no arbitration of solutions. There's no expression of preferences. That comes through a process of selection. all right, through the evaluation, which will be clearly stated with the criteria in the RFP. No request for suppliers to share any information they don't want to share, and the Commonwealth is not in a position and would never share details of specific proposals. That is not the role. That is the role of dialogue that ensues, going through a process that would be brought into these types of forums. And so a minute ago we talked about connecting the dots, and went through a little bit of a quick list, and here it is repeated in non-acronym form. But these are some of the dots that need to be connected to build the type of platform that is envisioned in this engagement. And we would argue any type of platform, because we're not asking for anything that hasn't been done or can't be done. We're simply asking for more transparency and a better definition for how the types of handoffs and processes are going to be run, managed, and then reported, and then improved upon. So when are the dots connected? We don't want to wait until contracts are signed. That doesn't make sense. They have to be connected during the process, during a procurement process. So while framing the requirements, certainly before an RFP even gets out on a street, there's going to be interaction among teams within VITA and across the Commonwealth of what the requirements look like, and a discussion of potential overlaps. There might be some intentional overlap put across procurements that we would ask the market to sort out. That's again where Perry was going a minute ago about, that's an example of having a market-based approach. Might be something that the Commonwealth simply just doesn't know how to resolve. Well, that's fine. Let's ask a market-based approach. Let's ask them how we can best do this. While evaluating responses, while negotiating an agreement, which gets into the selection process, and then while training for governance and learning more about the governance model and how to engage across the Commonwealth with a solution. And then how are the dots connected? And again, this is where these integration sessions are so important. Certainly there are direct references between documents, between solution documents, between contract documents. A scope is going to be related to the people who are delivering the scope. There's always the at-risk amount, which is a consideration in a bid that has to be sorted through when you're looking at the type of solution and how it integrates. There are always indirect references to performance in a supplier environment, and we want to draw those out and have a dialogue about those as soon as we can. And then things that are simply inferred, things that are terms that have different meaning depending on who might be using the particular word. And we've bumped up against these words just as everybody has over the years, and we want to try to make those connections as clear as we possibly can as early as possible. And so the next one is that eye chart, and the only point here is to say that this is a diagram of the contractual structure that you will see as the RFPs proceed. The MSA is the top document. It comes with many exhibits. Again, I'm sure you are all familiar with various structures of this nature, but everything from your service management manual, your operating level agreements, to your exhibits like your statements of work, your reporting and service level management, your exhibit, your pricing and financial provisions, and your human resources provisions. In a multi-supplier environment, these all need to be connected. There has to be some common sets of terms and conditions, but then the solutions and the statements of work for each provider have to in some way be able to connect with the solutions and statements of work of another provider. So being able to manage all this, navigate it, put it all together so that it comes in a cohesive whole that VITA will be able to manage and see is important, and is one of the main drivers behind why these integration sessions are something that we think will add some value. So I think with that, my little piece is over. Let's click and make sure, yes it is, so conclusion, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Perry. Thank you.
Go ahead, page on through to the conclusion here. We've just tried to describe at a very high level the process that's designed to help everyone understand how the future platform will work. We, the Commonwealth, our customers, as they participate alongside VITA, want to understand how your solutions work. We actually want you to understand and hear firsthand what our requirements are, not just to read them on paper. By design, there will hopefully be overlaps, so we want to remove and make that efficient for you all and for us. But we also want to understand if there are gaps and how we can bring those to closure. And then, as always, remove any transitional risk. Such a large scope of work, whether that's moving PCs or mailboxes or server and storage consumption, network, voice, we want all those transitions to happen as seamlessly as possible. And just in case you weren't aware, many of us have a reference point from not too long ago. So we do want to make that experience a little bit better than that. We think we're starting from a different point. We hope you appreciate we are starting from a different point. Those things couldn't have been achieved without our incumbent and our first IT sourcing endeavor, but we're looking to extend and improve upon that going forward. We want to make sure that you understand we want you to have the ability to remove assumptions and risks from your proposals. That's what the process was designed to do, is to get you more information and more clarity so that you can refine your responses and proposals and get to a better working solution, and hopefully a demonstration of that through integration sessions. We will skip the appendix for now, but let me leave it with here in the conclusion side. I believe the mechanics we expressed earlier were, at this point in time, to open up for questions. I want to start with questions from the room, and because we are not going to pass a mic around, if you would, say it loudly, and either myself or Patrick will repeat the question for the benefit of those joining by phone, and then we will try to answer it or take a note and come back to you with an answer subsequent. So with that, for anyone participating in the room, if you have any questions. Yeah.
Currently, you have yeah, I look at three major assets right now belong to Northrop, being the equipment, the facilities, and the people, currently all part of Northrop. What's the future state of those three main assets?
Make sure I reflect back your question. There's a question about what happens to the current assets being used relative to services. Assets, people, and the building. They will be available to oncoming service providers. In our current contractual construct, we have, as most of these contracts have, resolution fees, coincident termination. So when we terminate, which we have provided notice on the first two items in wave one, it will be available to us certain assets, software, hardware, what have you, as well as personnel who are directly involved in the delivery of those services for your use if you choose to. So you may choose to use that as part of your solution. Fairly obvious, the cost of those resolution fees that are borne by the Commonwealth may have to be accounted either by us or by you. So we'll make that information available to you, so you may incorporate that in your proposal. Yes. So the question, just to repeat for everyone's benefit and to make sure that I heard it correctly, is there an intent to award multiple suppliers among the procurements? We have adopted a guiding principle internal to the program where certain service areas may accommodate multiple suppliers. There are some where that doesn't make sense. In particular, the MSI and the service desk, we can't have multiple MSI service desk service providers simultaneous. But we may have multiple server stand-up service providers or multiple end-user compute service providers. Think regional, think array of services. Some of you may be familiar with the fact that the Commonwealth already has a multi-supplier environment under managed print services. So where it makes sense, the Commonwealth may have multiple suppliers in the same service domain. We also may choose multiple suppliers for that convenience component that I mentioned earlier, where besides customers that are executive branch agencies who would enjoy an enterprise solution, we may make available the master contract for other public bodies, higher ed, localities, counties, all those entities that qualify as public body. So we may have multiple awards in a given service area, both for the proposal of services to our executive branch agencies, but for other public bodies as well. Does that answer your question? Other questions from within the room? Sir.
Where do you want, or is there a limitation on where the servers can be?
So the question for everyone's benefit is there a limitation, or does the Commonwealth have a desire for the location of servers and storage or data? We know for sure that it is within the continental United States, but we do not currently have a mandate for it to remain in the Commonwealth. Other questions? Take yours first.
So the follow-up, you said it's not currently mandated to be implemented. Does that mean that that could change?
So what I anticipate is we'll ask for both. Many of you may be familiar with the fact that in any political entity there is probably some sensitivity to economic development. So there may be some lingering questions as to whether or not we can achieve it from within the Commonwealth, and why not if we could. So our requirements may ask you, can you, would you, are you able to? You tell us which one works best. And reflect back to us what that means. Let me be a little bit more express. If you are to meet our Commonwealth-only delivery, what does that mean commercially? Relative to doing it the way you would rather we enjoy those services. Yes, sir.
What's your intent or approach towards SLAM?
So the question is for those on the phones, our intentions or approach relative to SWAMs. Per the governor's executive order, we are sensitized to the leveraging or the use of SWAM entities. And so where possible, if you can accommodate, partner with, or work with larger or supporting partners to achieve and participate in the delivery of solutions, we'd appreciate that. Any preference or lift, if you will, in the evaluation process will be expressed in the RP document.
One fast question. You mentioned that this contract would be available to other entities. Prior experience here, is there a fee associated with that for those other entities to use?
So make sure I get the question here. While it's our intent to make contracts available for other public bodies, will there be a fee associated with those other public bodies using those contracts? It's normal practice for VITA to use, it is in, I think, the way that it manifests, and I'm going to look over to our Director for Supply Chain Management. Typically, we accommodate it through industrial funding IFA. That is the fee structure by which other public bodies, we have actually procured on their behalf, so there is a bit of a use fee, but it's nominal. Let me start with you, ma'am. Okay, so the question is around cloud brokerage and infrastructure services as a service, optional services under the upcoming procurements. Yes, they are. And here was the point. We are largely on-premise. All our footprint is 50% in this data center, about 50% in local sites. There is a desire by everyone, but in particular the Commonwealth, the executive branch agencies, to figure out how to get to the cloud, whether that's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. The one that's closest to our current infrastructure service is obviously infrastructure as a service. To the extent that your solutions can bring those to bear, but also help us navigate moving from our significant premise-based consumption to a cloud, that would be helpful. Does that answer your question? Largely, well, brokerage may come from MSI. Brokerage may also come from server and storage. We're going to ask everybody and figure out who has the best skills. You can. Mm-hmm. Someone else had a question. Yes, sir. Will the slides be available? We're actually recording this session, so my voice will be on YouTube very shortly, along with the slides. Yes, sir, it will. And we'll post these as well to the website that has the recommendations of VITA's website. Yes, sir? No. At least that is our current position for now. We haven't declared the rules for Wave 3 yet, but it's our desire that the MSI operate as independently as possible. Yes, sir? You mentioned that certain resolutions. We'll make the information available. In other words, if a proposal wants to use this data facility, and we'll tell you what the resolution fee associated with that is. Now, we'll probably have to work out whether you want us to pay that in your prices or your proposal reflect that we have paid for that and you're going to use our asset, or you want to absorb that in your proposal. Either way can be proposed. We want to understand why you're proposing one versus the other. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Is not our current intention, since that is by code. They may request exception and we'll process that as normally, but that's a normal internal state government function where all agencies mandated to be in scope to VITA and its services are until they seek exception. Yes, sir?
Find another question, which is there a preference?
So the question for those on the phone is, relative to the data center as an example, is there a preference as to where such an asset would be brought to bear? There isn't. Yes, sir.
You mentioned you're going to post this on YouTube, which is fun. Will you also post the attendees both on the phone as well as here as part of that?
The attendees themselves, we will see if we've gathered that. I don't think we have individuals by name, but I do believe we have the companies represented here. Any other questions from within the room? I want to go ahead and open up the lines. It will probably be a little bit of a confusion, but for anyone participating by phone, if you have questions.
So that's all I know. I mean, Erica would know she's out. But she would probably call me, send a note if she heard something.
All right, that's fair enough. So, the last thing I want to do is add another layer of administration to the
All right.
forwarding, because I know how busy you guys are. So,
for those on the phone, if you mute that for a second. For those of you participating on the phone, if you would please mute your end, unless you have a question you would like to pose, we'd appreciate reducing the background noise. All right, if you'll open the lines again, please.
he's sitting there every day, so he's being very responsible. I'm like, all right, that's fair.
Yeah, listen, I've been texting with Erica. She's back tomorrow. I will make sure that.
Go ahead and mute the line. All right, for those of you on the phones, I apologize. We weren't able to successfully isolate the background noise. For that, I apologize. If you would, capture your questions, and we will, the same way we communicated out, we'll provide a venue for you to send your questions in, generate our answers for you, and post for everyone's benefit. Okay. All right. For those of you that are formally logged into the webinar, we can identify who you are, and you can leverage the chat function on GoToMeeting. If you have a question, please type it in via the chat function, and we'll see if we can read it out loud and answer your question. anything queued up? While that's queuing up, I want to thank you all again for taking time to travel down to Chester to spend about an hour with us, if not more. We'll be available for any additional questions, but please keep in mind if I capture any questions, I'm going to make the responses available to everyone. We are going to start off on an even, fair footing, and I want to make sure we maintain that throughout.
There might be one good point while we're waiting for things to queue up. It might be worth noting that the level of agency engagement that you brought through this process into what's happening currently.
We made it, tried to make it as abundantly clear as possible that we want you to be sensitive to our customers. And in fact, the way that we're going to require that from you is to recognize that our customers are alongside VITA in the procurements themselves, in the development of the strategy. To date, and as of right now, we have some 73 agency representatives, and they outnumber VITA proper about 3 to 1. So their voices will be heard and seen in the RFPs, in the evaluation process. They will be evaluation team members, helping to drive consensus on scoring on your proposals and influencing the selection of the eventual service providers, as well as the shaping of the statements of work. At the end of the day, we need your services to meet their needs. We're among those users too, but we're a small community amongst a large population of folks. We envision among the 3 different procurements currently, we have 6 customers each for MSI, server storage, as well as managed security. In fact, I think we have 8 customers in managed security. We have customers embedded to what we're calling a cross-functional procurement team, the business team. And they are both technologists and non-technologists, direct reports of agency heads, if you will. So the business voice, not just the technology voice, will be heard in the procurement. And even our cross-functional finance team has some customers embedded there. They need to understand how your proposals from a financial perspective perform relative to consumption and all those other things that happen when you consume managed services. So the question being proposed to the chat function is, how does a company or business register to receive information regarding this program? I mentioned that this information and the YouTube capturing the voice track at least will be available. We'll post it. The slides themselves will be separately posted. Any information that we communicate about the RFPs will happen through EVA. I want to make sure that if you're an interested supplier, you should already be registered through EVA. That was our primary communications vehicle. If we need to communicate through other channels, we'll do that as well. Did I miss anything, Phil? EVA, EVA, EVA. We have no other questions. Thank you for allocating time to spend with us. Enjoy a safe drive home.